Great. Good afternoon and welcome to the District Sechelt Committee of the Whole. Council, it being 3:33 on Wednesday, June 28th. I'll call the meeting to order. Any conflicts or other concerns? On a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Seconded, all in favor? Carried. Then we go to our first our delegation. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Sorry, my screen shrunk here, but please go ahead, Dr. Taketa. Thank you. I'm sorry. I'll press them. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor.
Great. Thank you.
I am grateful for the opportunity to be with the committee this afternoon, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to start by acknowledging and expressing my gratitude for the opportunity to join you today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Sechelt Nation. A lot of people don't know me, but I do see some familiar faces. I am joining you today as the Regional Medical Health Officer with Vancouver Coastal Health, covering the coastal rural communities within our region. Those include the Sunshine Coast, but there are others outside of the Sunshine Coast, including Central Coast, Bella Coola Valley, Cathet region, as well as others on the Sea to Sky region, including the resort municipality of Whistler, Pemberton, Squamish. I'm also a proud resident of the Lower Sunshine Coast, so it's a humbling opportunity to be able to present to you today on an important health topic. Most of you, I think, and people in the audience would be familiar with the role of the medical health officer and the work that we do in public health, particularly, I think, because we've been thrown into the spotlight as a result of the pandemic response. But our work entails more than just communicable disease control and outbreak management. I'm just going to share my screen. As mentioned, our work includes more than just communicable disease management. As specialists in public health and preventative medicine, as physicians, our communities are our patients, as opposed to other physicians who work with individual patients. But we have another distinguishing feature in that we have legislative responsibilities to be able to carry out activities that promote and protect the health of the population. The BC Public Health Act is one that is depicted on the slide that you see here. We work across partnerships, with various groups to advocate on behalf of the public. And we also, one of, I think, the most interesting features of our work is working with local governments to influence healthy public policy, because you have a very important role, even though you don't have a direct responsibility for acute care, for example. The policies, the planning, the decisions that you make really have a significant potential to impact population health outcomes. The recommendations and what I'm going to share with you today could be summarized in one easy slide, which is here, that active transportation is important. It's important that it remains a priority and focus within the District of Sechelt's Transportation Master Plan. And this is a critical and important juncture that the community is facing in terms of a potential to expand and improve active transportation infrastructure. And we're going to talk about why that's important, especially at this time, including the health benefits that can come out of this directly, but also why it's important to address the transportation needs of a growing and aging community and other important benefits for climate change adaptation. I'll start by acknowledging that the district has actually been quite a leader in active transportation, prioritization, and promotion. And so I applaud you for that. This has been demonstrated with the foresight that the community had more than 10 years ago in terms of having a specific plan and framework that prioritizes specific actions and tangible outcomes around active travel, how it's going to be promoted, measures of progress and success. And it's also evidenced by the funding investments and having dedicated staff that have been able to advanced this work over the years. And just the next few slides just emphasize specific aspects of the official community plan that highlighted those specific actions. And I think also within the community sustainability plan, we've seen reference to active transportation. So I would like to highlight that you have actually been a leader in this, and I have worked with other rural and remote communities, and this is an excellent example. Active transportation does have many benefits, as mentioned, including those of increasing physical activity, but it also has broader societal benefits. It helps us to engage and socialize as a community. It increases our ability to move around across the ages. It keeps our community safer by keeping vehicles off the streets. But it also, from an economical perspective, actually makes sense in terms of things like the contribution on tourism. Given the high costs of living, spending less money on fuel actually is of benefit to our communities. And then the current crisis that we're facing in terms of climate change as well. Being able to reduce greenhouse gases and other emissions and helping to improve our air quality are some of the benefits that are highlighted on this slide. I just wanted to step back a little bit, and I chose this slide because it's such a dramatic demonstration of the effects that climate change is having, particularly within our coastal rural areas. On the left, you see a map that depicts wildfire smoke vulnerability for our coastal rural areas, and on the right, heat vulnerability. And it's a result of the work that's been done within the office of our Chief Medical Health Officer in VCH. And this type of mapping just shows how, in terms of exposure, a sensitivity, our ability to adapt as communities, we're vulnerable. And the darker shaded areas show high vulnerability, the lighter showing less vulnerability. And you can see the areas, the Sunshine Coast, that we remain very vulnerable, sorry. This is not news to you because we're living the reality within the Sunshine Coast. The other slide that I wanted to talk about is to emphasize the impact that active transportation and physical activity can have in terms of being a protective factor. Cardiovascular disease and cancers still remain the top two leading causes of death within residents in the Sunshine Coast. And we have the ability to, not all of these are preventable, of course, but there's an opportunity to impact modifiable factors such as physical activity. It also has other impacts that are positive, including enhanced mental health and well-being, improving our sense of belonging, building our confidence and self-esteem, regulating sleep, all the good things that contribute to health and wellness. And when we talk about physical activity, sometimes it's framed in the concept of, going to the gym and having this rigorous physical activity, but we know that every little bit counts, whether we're moving about for leisure or active transportation. We do have benefits in all these different areas, leading to us becoming a more resilient community and being able to fare better when we face crises and challenges. We are continuing to see a concerning trend of decreasing physical activity right across the world, essentially, when we look at the WHO data, when we look at national data, where as a society not able to meet even the minimum guidelines that have been set for 24-hour movement for Canada. And this is across for adults as well as for youth, and this is problematic. And it's not that people don't know the benefits of physical activity, but there are significant and I think valid concerns that community members have brought forward, and I think some of them our staff will be, your staff will be communicating around safety, which is probably the most important area to things like cycling, where pedestrians and cyclists are competing with traffic that is moving at very high speeds that are not always enforceable. and lack of things like separated bike lanes. That really is a disincentive for people wanting to engage in physical activity. The lack of network connectivity, I may be encouraged and motivated to travel, but if I'm not able to get to my final destination, it's too much of a hassle. I'm not going to do it. And then there are other issues as well, but I think this emphasizes why embedding active transportation within our short and long-term planning and growth strategies is very important now for the district, but for other rural communities as well. I just wanted to step back as well and just focus on this population pyramid, which shows that we're continuing to grow as a community on the Sunshine Coast. And we're growing across all age groups, but I would like to draw particular attention to the growth that's happening within the seniors population. As of the latest census data, our population over the age of 65 is about a third of the entire population on the Sunshine Coast. It's projected to increase to make up 41% of our total population by the time we reach 2040. And we're going to be seeing growth in other age groups as well. So I think the key message is here. We need to ensure that we embed strategies and planning that allows for our senior population, but also other age groups to be able to maintain and sustain a thriving, active, and independent lifestyle throughout the lifespan. Of concern as well is what we're seeing, and this is nothing that's new, but it's depicted on this graph, on these two graphs, the prevalence of depression and mood and anxiety disorders amongst our children and youth on the Sunshine Coast. And you can see the data here is shown from early 2000s all the way to most recently 2022. And it's the prevalence amongst children ages 1 to 19 years throughout that time period per 100,000 population. And that allows us to be able to compare the Sunshine Coast in the green line there to the average for BC communities in the black line, and then the rest of BCH communities in the blue line. And you can see there's an undeniable increase in trajectory there that's, it precedes the pandemic. So it may have been worsened by the pandemic, but it's been going in the wrong direction. And I think the key message too here is that although there's a need to invest on the lower end of the spectrum in terms of treatment services, counseling support, psychiatric services, those types of services, it really is an opportunity to look upstream at what are some of the preventable things, easy wins that we know are proven to work, like increasing physical activity. And this slide, I think, just emphasizes the window of opportunity that we have to intervene and make a difference amongst our youth in particular. The data from children within the school division in the area shows that about approximately 40% take a bus or car to school, but many of them would prefer to take active transportation, such as cycling or taking a scooter to school. And the higher they get in their grades, the less motivated they are to actually prefer active transportation. So we need to start early and embed this and make it part of their routine lives. Most of the commuters in the district of Sechelt are using vehicles, even though if you look at the next slide, most of them are traveling very short distances. So there's actually an opportunity for the district to actually make changes that actually influences those people's behavior. And that actually could be a big win in terms of the other benefits that we talked about earlier in the slides. And I understand as well that there's actually a lot of community support for active transportation if there are supports in place that enable people to move in that direction. This is going to be my final slide, and I just want to recap and emphasize the key messages that I've been able to relay today. One is that this is an opportune time, and we're at a critical juncture for the district to continue prioritizing active transportation in the region. There's broad support for more active transportation from various community members. We're not getting sufficient physical activity across all ranges within our community, and this is not just a local problem, it's a global phenomenon. We are a growing and expanding and aging population on the Sunshine Coast, and we need to plan accordingly. This is part of it. And we remain very vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and it's just getting worse. There are a number of different solutions, of course, and we're not listing them all here, but we've learned about the barriers that are faced by community members. We need to make an targeted effort to work on removing these. We need to leverage investments to enable essential active transportation infrastructure within the region. And this is a crucial time, I think, and a very timely opportunity. The district is already a leader. Let's continue to support the prioritization by continuing to include this in the transportation master plan. And again, this is an opportunity for you to just continue being a leader in this important area and to work towards, I think, our shared goals of a thriving and healthier Sunshine Coast community. And I'd like to conclude by just thanking you all for this opportunity and to also acknowledge the work of my colleagues within the Healthy Public Policy Unit, including Sally McBride, who's here with me today for the work that they've done in supporting putting together this information. And I will bring it to a close and hand it back to the chair. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Ketla. Councillor Inkster gets to go first with questions. Microphone.
Thanks for coming and speaking to these issues. There was one question I had about the ending slide about some ideas of mitigation that you may have that you alluded to in your last, so maybe I'll talk to you offline about that, how we can help. What I wanted to mention though is through you is a couple of things. The part about the heat and the smoke, that's sort of a encouragement and a reminder to something staff's already doing, is providing cooling centers and indoor facilities, public facilities, to help people get out of the smoke, help people get out of the heat. So we're doing that. We just need to make sure that we keep smoke and heat in mind, because we may not get hot, but there may be smoke around that we need to get people with cardiovascular issues out of and into those centers. The other issue I wanted to mention is the transportation pieces. I think that as a municipality, it's important that we continue to develop our off-highway pathways and bike paths, because the highway is not as safe. Not as many people want to travel on the highway, especially in the evening when they can't be seen. So if we continue to develop that, that helps with our active transportation. And I wanted to mention to this council, because you may have heard that the regional district is pushing heavily for 30-minute bus service in the corridor. So that means more frequent bus service, as well as free bus service for certain members of the population. So they'll actually use it, but that may have a tax implication. And more bus service to link up to the corridor. So although it's not active transportation, although I did speak to the pathway issue, if we get people taking more buses, they do have to walk to the bus and walk back from the bus. That's more of an active transportation than just jumping in a vehicle. But I just wanted to mention that to council because it's coming to the regional district. It may have a tax implication, but I think we should support it. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Inkster. Other questions? I'm looking to make sure I don't forget Councillor Toff. I'll ask Dr. Ketla, is it fair to say active transportation, it's a subset of physical activity? It's one way of getting physical activity. Is there an order of magnitude do you consider in the whatever the industry that is physical activity? Is it 5%, 25%? How would you categorize it? You just press the, yeah, thanks.
Oh, thank you for that question, Mayor Hansen. And I'm going to try and reframe it a little bit in that, again, my opinion, and I think the evidence supports this, is that every little bit counts. And I think if we refer to the 24-hour movement guidelines, which are, again, a baseline for what we should be aiming for on a daily basis for children, 60 minutes, and on a weekly basis for adults, 150 minutes. So that's not really a lot. And usually the recommendation as a physician would be, just enough to get your heart racing and into a comfortable pace. You don't want to obviously overexert yourself. And then for people with underlying chronic diseases or cardiac issues, consulting with their physician about what is safe would be advisable as well. So every little bit counts. And I'll go back to Councillor Inkster's comment there about using the bus. People would have to walk, of course, and so that makes a difference. And then getting off the bus, going elsewhere. That's still what we want. We want to encourage that. So I think it's the combination of all of that is what we encourage. So it may not necessarily be achieved by just going to the gym. It could be that combination of cycling and walking and doing other types of physical activity as well that gets our body moving and our heart rate increasing.
Mhm. Okay. You should be in politics. Very good. Other questions, Council? Councillor Rowe had to leave because she needed some physical exercise. Councillor Bell, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for this great presentation. As you know, it's no surprise that municipalities certainly struggle with resources, infrastructure, et cetera. And one of our challenge is certainly our Ministry of Transportation in terms of working with some of our challenges around our main highway, certainly expanding areas, making it safer, et cetera, for cycling, et cetera. And so just kind of knowing that in terms of, do you have any advice as to how, so we start with us as a municipality in terms of what we can budget for and look at the needs of our community. Do you have any advice as to how we might advocate for this more in terms of our provincial government and certainly our federal governments?
You're gonna start off by turning on your mic.
Yes, I should have done that. I apologize. I'm going to start off by adding a couple of key things, and I'll defer to my colleague to see if she has anything to add. But I agree with you. I understand that there's a shared responsibility in terms of the district and other partners, including Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. And I've heard certainly since my arrival in the coast, a lot of issues and I think potential areas of advocacy around different issues as it relates to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. So that is certainly on the radar of my office. I think it's going to be, again, a partnership and collaboration and continued dialogue. They may be seeing, and of course, I don't speak on behalf of ministry. They may be seeing things differently. We have other competing priorities as a district. And so you're coming at it from a different angle. And so maybe I'll speak specifically to the role that I think my office can play in that. And we have done for other places in terms of being a facilitator of communication. What are our shared goals? I'm sure they would understand. I haven't had a chance to speak directly with them in reference to the presentation that I'm giving today. But we want to achieve the same thing in terms of healthy, connected, thriving communities where common shared goals and things that we can partner on. I don't have specifics, but I'm sure your staff may have additional ideas around that. But I know that certainly from the conversations that we have had within our medical health officer group, there's momentum and desire, I think, even from the provincial government to support communities in expanding active transportation infrastructure. We're hearing of investments that are coming. So I think some of the work that our Healthy Public Policy unit is supporting is around, being able to look out for these types of opportunities. And then as we engage, bring them to your attention if you're not aware of them as yet. So I think those are just some of the practical things that I can think of now. Sally, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
this might just be a reiteration of what you said, but, and you probably know in the last year, the Ministry of Transportation in the last budget has contributed 100 million over the next 3 years to active travel. And that's the biggest investment that the province has ever made. And so it is a time of change at the provincial level as well. And I think they're paying attention. And there is the active travel BC strategy as well as Clean BC. So they do have targets that need to be met. So I think advocacy from the municipal realm to the province, you know, continuing that, especially in collaboration with the other municipalities and districts on the coast. It's a challenge being faced by all the rural communities in BCH, absolutely, that we're hearing.
I'll also add that one thing that we have done is, and I've done this since I've arrived here as well, is even if it's supporting funding applications, my office is happy to partner on that. Sometimes the voice of the local medical health officer makes a difference. Sometimes it doesn't. But I'm certainly happy to review how strategically we can support, whether it's providing specific data on health outcomes, leading causes of death, demonstrating how climate change is impacting the region, and why this makes sense for you to be embarking in a specific direction. Very happy to always look at that and support.
Okay. Well, great. I think, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, thank you through the chair. I was just wondering, since you're here, if you can give any examples of approaches from other places in terms of design or development or things that we could use here that we're not currently doing here.
All right. Thank you for that question, Councillor McLaughlin. I'll speak generally without necessarily singling out specific communities, or maybe I'll start by singling out one community. Because my colleague, who's a medical health officer in City of Richmond, just actually had she and her team presented to the community there to advocate for specific funding and expansion of that would be to more connectivity within their one of their networks there. So I think that's a good example of community advocacy and public health supporting that. And of course, that's based on kind of the need for the community. So we can't just go in and do what we want. We would support what you see as best based and provide our best advice. And it's always a bit of a challenge for smaller rural communities because we're so remote and separated. And so we need to be innovative. I think I would, you already have, I think, things outlined within, I guess, the old master plan, and including things like, what you hear from your community members around separated bike lanes or how to increase, frequency of bus service, or how to ensure that you have safe crosswalks, or how to ensure that you have bicycle rack infrastructure on either end of the travel commute path. So things like that are just are practical, but I think it would be specific to the community, and you happen to have the expertise of, I think, staffing within your district who'd be able to contribute. And we also have a specific team within the Office of the Chief Medical Health Officer who do this all the time, separate from our kind of local coastal rural area. So we can tap into that expertise as well to, kind of review, working together with your staff. This is what we're thinking. How does it fit in with best practice? They can support with looking at things like evidence reviews, and then be able to inform any direction that you would be proposing to go within the district. So I think I'd probably leave it at that. Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for the presentation. Sure, after we hear the next reports, we'll be back talking to you. Okay, thank you. Great. Council, we'll move to item 5.1 on the agenda and bring 3 microphones, or I guess we'll hear from Ms. Lee, Ms. Stepovic, and Ms. Vickers. Also, we have the, on page 25, the report, the update on the TMP. Oh. How's this going to work?
Yeah, we just will just say a little bit here, but I just want to say good afternoon. And with the report, we wanted to introduce this transportation master plan to this council. Our TMP is intended to guide how we're going to meet our community's transportation needs over the next 20 years. We've been working on it for some time. And as the report indicates, we're in the final stages of developing the components that will make up the plan. There will be an opportunity to consider and comment on the draft plan coming up, both through a presentation to this council with our consultant Stantec, as well as a set of public engagement sessions, both virtual and in person, to gather additional feedback on the draft plan before we actually finalize it. Staff have put a significant amount of effort into elevating the public engagement piece of this. And then I'll pass it to Lindsay to comment on that.
Thank you. So yeah, we've had quite a bit of feedback from residents and engagement, and I'll just go through a couple of the things that we did, or a few of the things that we did to engage citizens. We had 2 open houses. One was virtual and one was in person at different times. So hopefully getting people that might be at work or not at work. Several stakeholder meetings. I think I have a list of about 10 here, and that ranges from all different kinds of stakeholders in our community. A workshop with an advisory group of volunteers. And so some of these people were just a mom with little kids, maybe a person that's part of Track C, but people that wanted to be on this little advisory committee, or group rather, not committee. We also had a workshop. Oh, that was the workshop. Sorry about that. And then the Your Say Seashell page, that website just opened up almost at the same time as this project came on. So we really got to put it to use and see what kind of tools we could use on that website. So for that website, there's an interactive map where people are able to take a pin and stick it exactly on the map where they think that something should change or a suggestion. There was a survey, there was an ideas board, a questions and answers area, a quick poll. And so far this project has garnered the highest number of engagements on that website yet. So yeah, that's promising. And then of course we did the regular media channels as well, including social, community, and print. Thank you. Over to Marina.
Yeah, I'm just going to say a short bit about what we did above and beyond the regular public engagement. So staff went out onto the streets and we posted notices with QR codes about where to get the survey and how to provide the input. We handed out paper surveys to people that might not have phones. We went and stood at bus stops and talked to people. We went to the senior center, engaged with them. We went to parent and taught baby groups to speak to parents about how they get around town. We went to schools. We went and did a session with grade 4 and 5 at Davis Bay. We got some input directly and then through the school district as well. And what else? So all of that was mostly discussions about public expectations, their transportation system. It was about costs, about the highway. We heard a lot about, mostly our discussions were really delving into what could be with our transportation system. So I guess we can summarize that what we mostly heard about was similar to what was in the official community plan from 2010, is that there is a strong desire in the community for more options that are not in cars. We did hear from the car groups as well. And I think there was mostly satisfaction with our transportation system. But we heard about people that want to get around more with walking routes, with bike lanes, integrating with bus travel. We heard a desire for efficient and enjoyable ways of getting around, not just safe, but they actually want it to be shaded and in nice locations. And we had some great suggestions from the community advisory volunteers that came out about quick wins and things that wouldn't maybe cost too much. So we have collected a lot of that feedback on maps. A summary of the initial public engagement is in your report. And yeah, there was accessibility issues as well that came up and some great suggestions. So that's kind of a summary of what we did. Thank you.
So we've summarized the feedback that we got from the community, and from the maps and comments and so forth, and are integrating that into the transportation master plan, along with the engineering portion of that. So that will be upcoming in the draft piece that will be presented in the future, but we're here for any questions now on where they're at, or if you have any thoughts or input that you'd like considered prior to the presentation that will be coming. The team would be very happy to collect any questions or information after the session as well. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I see Councillor Shepherd first, and then I see Councillor Inkster and Councillor Bell.
That's great. Thanks very much to the chair, to the group. That's fantastic information. We're really looking forward to the report. I think it's something this council wants to work on closely over the next 3.5 years. I'm just wondering of the information that you collected, was there a lot of consensus on what their desired improvements were? Did it all fall into a certain number of things? Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, thank you for the question and through the chair. There was themes that we pulled out of all of the sessions and the information and the feedback, and we've broken it down into kind of groups of information. And active or alternative travel was, I would say, by far the biggest piece that people want: connectivity and ways to get around without a passenger vehicle. So that was the biggest theme, but of course we did hear from people that drive cars. We did hear from people that have different transportation needs as well. But we did summarize and break down that feedback into different themes.
Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that the health officer is willing to support our ideas and projects with letters of support if we request them based on the analysis that they themselves will do. I think we have good ideas, so I'm sure the analysis will bear that letter of support. But in terms of the moving forward with the district's plans, it's always about the costs of providing the infrastructure. I was just walking up Norwest Bay the other day, and it's actually quite a good road if anybody wants to walk it or go up there. And there's a number of people I know, including staff, that live up there, so they probably walked on the Norwest Bay. The sidewalk is in great shape. The road's in good shape. It's wide, it's well shaded. And I think we built that road just after 2001 for about $2 million. And I would say to this council, if some remembers that, I think just going off of just to Bailey there, that little piece there was hundreds of thousands of dollars to just do that small piece. So that's a great road. I've looked at it, I've walked it. I don't see a lot of cracks, as some people like to mention, on the road that need fixes right now, but it's a great project. And if we could work with funders and good plans and supports from groups like the health officer, it would be great to replicate that kind of sidewalk, width of road, straight, shaded in many parts of the district. I see two weaknesses: the inlet past East Porpoise Bay roadway and going south of town. I think that going that way and parts of downtown were in good shape, but I think those are our weaknesses. So that's good. Let's keep doing good things there, but I see those two weaknesses. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Where you started, I thought you were going to go, and I'll tag on to that. It's easy to say we want things until we say we got to pay for them. So in the assessments that staff, and I would add to BCH, when do you ask that question? How much are you willing to pay to get a bike lane, a sidewalk, whatever? I don't expect an answer right now, but I think that's fundamental. It's that we do put some dollar costs on these things before we, it's not Christmas. We got to pay for these things, unfortunately. Counselor Bell.
Through the chair, I just want to just really give my thank you for this great work you've done, because you've gone, certainly interviewed a good cross section of people, which is extremely important, plus the work, the different methodologies you've used, which is going to be important because this is a very critical area for us. In addition, it's going to cost us a lot of money. The other thing is that we know that seniors are continuing to, we will have a very large demographic senior population. Certainly the seniors that I know, I live in the boonies. So we have no, bus service out there. And there are a number of seniors out there. And their number one fear is, what am I going to do once I can't drive? And so I don't think that this is just something that my area considers. I think it's, again, that fear of being able to be independent, wanting to stay in your home and yet not have a way of getting around. So it's going to become a very critical issue for us in the future. And I think it's great to hear it's on the table, that we're getting more and more support from our Vancouver Coastal Health. And we're starting to hear again that it's important to the governments, but we need to keep that high on the priority list as we look at our demographics. So thank you for your great work on this in the report.
Thank you. Counselor McLaughlin, please.
Yeah, through the chair. Thank you. I was just wondering if you looked at it through the lens of using an e-bike, because, they can go pretty fast and it's become very popular for just like I have one and I'm thinking, well, there's some places I won't go, but I want to go. I want to go to Gibson's. I want to go Madeira Park. I want, but, it's a new thing, but it's also very important because it's great for tourism and it gets people out of their cars and they get to cheat because they don't have to ride everywhere up mountainsides themselves. So I was just wondering if you took a look at that. Thank you.
Thank you for the great question. And that's one of the big changes we're seeing right now with micromobility, where we used to not be able to consider a bike route with the advent of the electronic assist. Certainly those are viable routes now. And that's definitely something we're considering in this plan and in recommending connections, because that's one of the biggest missing links is connections between places that are missing. And certainly with e-bikes and those other micromobility modes, those are viable options.
Okay, Counselor Bell, question? A question? Yes.
Question. I'm sure that one of your stakeholders that you're working with is TRAC. And yeah, that's what I thought, because they've got a very comprehensive plan that they're working on. So I know that you could complement each other very well there in terms of the resources that they've got pulled together. So terrific. Thanks.
Great. Thank you. No,
So
please.
I can make one comment on that, because so much of the planning and the route planning and the connections deal with multi-jurisdictional corridors, MODI being one of them. And working with TRAC and advocating to MODI for some of these things. That's part of the plan, though the plan's focus is on the areas that we have jurisdiction over and recommending advocacy for these connections where we don't have our jurisdiction, but certainly working to try to make these connections beyond just the confines of Sechelt.
Yeah, you reference in here that you've had preliminary conversations with our Sechelt friends.
Yes, that's correct.
Very-
We have had a preliminary meeting discussing some potential connections between jurisdictions to Sechelt Nation.
We don't need a bike lane to nowhere. Okay, anything else? Counselor Talk? Nope. Okay. What's next? When do we see you back? When's it done?
Yeah, another great question. We're working right now, staff is working to compile our own layer of the mapping and all the information onto a digital format. And once that's digested by Stantec, our hope is to have some of these draft materials and the next open house likely towards the end of summer, early fall, depending on when the best time is to present that material, but that's when you'll be engaged next.
Great. And then a motion, I guess procedurally, motion to receive the report and seconded, all in favor of receipt. Carried. Thank you. I hope you all rode to work today. Oh, no, I didn't start. I didn't start this. But I didn't burn any gas. Thank you, everybody. Okay. Then we move on to short-term rental program implementation update. And council, this is a report, I believe, from Director Allen, just so that we and the public are aware of what's going to start or has started in some respects regarding short-term rental enforcement and all the new processes. So I assume we have a sound and lights video or something, YouTube,
Something like that.
Nickelback.
Unicorns.
Perfect.
Very brief presentation, your worship. I'll just go through some of this. So as folks are well aware, of course, the bylaw amendments were adopted into the business license bylaw in October of last year, and implementation began shortly thereafter. The challenge to BC courts was a bit of a time-consuming setback, but we persevered, made our way through. We ventured into the temporary use permit application process in January, which morphed into the allowance for consideration of lawful non-conforming use in some cases for the type 3. The type 1 and 2 permitting process commenced immediately at the beginning of this year. And but what we do find is that short-term rental is seasonal. Not everybody is ready to apply for their license in January or consider commencement of operation. And so it's ongoing. I can't say with specificity how many hours, but if you take 3 people in building, 2 people in bylaw, 4 or 5 or half a dozen people in planning working on this on a daily, regular basis, it's been a significant consumption of time to roll this out, to implement this, to make the gains and so forth. We're on the right track. It will take some time, however. So business licenses, I'll start here. Now, not everybody that's received a temporary use permit or even authorization for lawful non-conforming use has yet to follow up with a business license for a variety of reasons. Some were still reaching out to and reminding, other people have asked for an extension. And so you have these various numbers that I will discuss here. So these are the licenses we've issued, business licenses we've issued thus far. So as you can see, the type 1, the in-home 23, 31 for type 2s. We have 3 that have a combination of 1 and 2. And then so we've issued 19 business licenses for the type 3. I think that we can acknowledge that there's certainly more than that out there by a long shot. Those are the licenses that we've issued to date. And many of these have required inspections, follow-up, ongoing dialogue with applicants for clarification on parking, on safety, on compliance with the proposed use, and so forth. Now, taking a step back, because the non-conforming use was a big piece, it did evolve a little bit this year. Wasn't 100% anticipated to roll out this way, but we've adapted, done the best we can. So we received 35 requests for consideration of non-conforming use. In most cases, when we're doing non-conforming use reviews, it's citing. In some cases, it's zoning. And 20 plus years of being in this business, I've never looked at more than 1 at any given time. So to receive a batch of 35 was quite a procedure. We did have a staff team that reviewed them. Of course, as you may recall from the consideration hearing, the big challenges were parking, presence of the suite, and so forth. In order to maintain a fairness in procedure, the staff committee reviewed, presented them to me. In most cases, the very most I knew was a civic address, and just my knowledge of the system, I recognized that before thousands and 5,000s on Sunshine Coast highways in Davis Bay, Selma Park area. I know that Skookumchuck is in Sandy Hook, I have the basics, but I didn't know the applicants and the owners when presented to me for decision. In some cases, I pushed back on staff for reconsideration or more information, but we really did our best to look at this in a level, a fair, reasonable manner, did the best we could. And so we approved 24. That was just a functional technical approval that happens upstairs, and then the 10 that were denied, many of which didn't in fact appeal to council. And while we set deadlines here just for order of business and operations, there was one, I think, that was a little bit late and they remain under review. There are maybe one or two others that have mused about further requests to council pursuant to the community charter respecting denial of business license. So in as much as we're over the hump, there may be a few others that continue to trickle in as the weeks and months progress. Then the temporary use permit, we brought these to council a couple of times earlier this year. There were 6 approved by council, I believe 3 denied. There was one that was approved. I'm not sure. I think there were more than 3 denied. If I'm just doing the mental math right now because we had 2 meetings. But there was one that was approved as a TUP, but then entered into the fray of the nonconformity, proved that they were in fact nonconforming, and that changed their status to some degree. And so on to current enforcement. We are enforcing our bylaws. We do this. The most effective method of enforcement is through enforcement of operation without business license, right? And so that's where at this juncture, the complaint to our bylaw enforcement at seashell.ca or to our building inspector has been the most effective means of identification. And so we respond, we review, we look at the operation and so forth. We have seen some folks who applied for TUP and were not approved, have been operating. So they are aware of the program. I suspect that we'll see in coming weeks as the Granicus software unfolds that there are many people who have not participated in the approval program at all. And the reasons for that are yet to be determined. It could be through a variety of choices, but we're getting there on that. So we're working on messaging. We've updated our website. We've added the option to our District of Sechelt app, the Recollect app, where you can go in and report a problem. You can go in and report a short-term rental through that area as well, and traditional bylaw enforcement complaints. We are reviewing, and it's ongoing. And they come in waves. I think last week, many councillors received the same email from the same individual. And sometimes there's a bit of a scramble to catch up and see who got what, but we're doing the best we can. And we're in touch with these folks to let them know we received and just trying to centralize and coordinate our response a little bit. And it's a lot of work and we're doing the best we can in that regard. Bylaw enforcement is it's a fine line. We're duty bound by case study and common sense, to be fair, to be reasonable, to investigate accordingly, and we do so. But the next supplement in the tool is the Granicus software. Folks have heard a lot about the Granicus. It is being developed, loaded. The unroll is not quite yet ready. There's training next week or the week after. First step is the address identification. And this is what it monitors any number of websites. So, we commonly say Airbnb, but that's like calling a tissue a Kleenex, right? There's VRBO, there's vacation, there's rental by owner, there's Craigslist, there's any number of means of advertising. And so there's a whole host of us that require training. We require a login authorization on the Granicus software to get a handle on that, to see what's out there. And so that's the first piece that will be unrolled very soon. So we can start more effective monitoring. At this juncture, we can go on to any of these websites, of course, like anybody else can and look, but this will give it all in a centralized platform in one place for us, mobile friendly for phones and tablets, as well as within the office. The next step will be the 24/7 hotline. This will enable folks to be in touch, to ask questions. Granicus offers this to upload pictures, videos, comments, complaints, diary of events, if that's necessary. In some cases, we may well receive them and we may find out it's a type 2 and they're completely consistent with their license and we respond to them and carry on. Other cases, it may very well help us with monitoring, compliance, enforcement, and so forth. And so it'll be a big bonus for us. And then, so as we wait for this to unfold, and it's not going to unfold immediately or as quickly as we'd like, we'll be building it, collecting information this summer. It'll form part of our summary report to council later this year. But Granicus is underway, but not operational immediately. And wish it were sooner, but we're working on it best we can. And so in the meantime, we do ongoing compliance. And compliance monitoring, pardon me, I'm mixing the message here, is another part of the Granicus software. They have template letters that they'll show us. We agree upon them with wording for these letters. Seashell letterhead, it's our letter. They send it out for us. There'll be an introductory letter. There'll be compliance letters where need be. It's all linked to us. We'll know what's happening, but it's part of the service that they provide that takes the burden off of our administrative process and really assists us in that regard. And pardon me, I hit the button twice. A little bit more about the 24/7 hotline. I think I may have mentioned this, but it provides reports and dashboards to look at, to track complaints. It will complete a history of all these calls. It'll enable us to focus our investigation on a specific property. It'll also enable us to compile, create data that we can use in quarterly reports, that we can use in our annual summary report to look at next steps for next year as well, and really provide. And they also are, I've seen another screenshot, which wasn't ready to be included here, but it shows the loading of the data and acknowledgement of the number of short-term rentals in Seashell and the various types. There are a few little quirks that we need to work out with them, and we're in regular contact with the folks at Granicus. And this one here shows what it'd be like either on a computer or, as they say, on a phone, where we can track comments. We can look at calls within 30 days, all-time calls, really be able to start building our numbers as to the volume. It's in as much as my numbers in the first few slides are relatively modest. I think it's showing that there's over 200 short-term rentals in the district of Seashell at the moment from all types. We do know, I've heard from reliable sources that some of those that were not approved are for sale. I've heard from reliable sources that the long-term rental market is increased. I've also read online, it's a lot of detail coming out of the United States right now about the collapse of the short-term rental market. And we'll see how that impacts Seashell, about how short-term rental market generally was saturated and is cooling down now in this post-COVID era, and what's going to happen with this housing stock in all of these cities across the United States with these houses that will be available for sale or long-term rent, and what that has, the impact that has on the market. So it's nothing more than, for me at this point, interesting reading, but there's the tail effect, and what does that mean for smaller towns throughout North America, including Seashell. But going back to our original project goals here, the first project goal was neighborhood fit. The second project goal was protection of housing supply. And we've kept that in mind throughout, as well as then you get down into supporting tourism and supplemental income and economic opportunities and so forth. So we recognize the balance and the need for tourist accommodation in Seashell. And we've certainly issued, many type 1 and type 2s, as well as several type 3s. So we're hoping that we are achieving this balance. And this summer, we'll be doing the best we can. I can't promise that every unlawful short-term rental will be shut down in the next 2 weeks or any outlandish statement like that, but we're doing the best we can to keep on top of it and monitor and enforce where necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Questions? Councillor Shepherd.
That's great to get the update to the chair, because I think a lot of people are interested in it. I guess my question, I think you've half answered it in terms of what neighbors can do during this period when Granicus isn't up and running yet. How can they help the bylaw enforcement people enforce the regulations? I think their people are suggesting that if they funnel in, they themselves will look at Airbnb. If they see a listing, if they know that someone's operating illegally, just take a snapshot of it and send it through to planning department or enforcement. Thanks.
Yeah, that sounds like the best approach. I would suggest at this juncture, bylaw enforcement at seashell.ca is our centralized hub for receipt of bylaw complaints. I did neglect to mention that we have hired a third bylaw officer who is expected to start next week. We'll be working on Mr. Nyes, who's not here this week, but we're working on a rotating schedule of 7-day week coverage. I think the way this schedule shaped down, there might be one day during the week where there's a single bylaw officer, but we'll have two on during the weekend. Most likely in daytime office hours, but we'll be able to monitor, keep track of weekend input. I think what we saw, not so much this week, but the week before on the Monday morning was just an avalanche of information we're trying to keep up with over the weekend. And that'll be greatly helpful for us as well. And beyond that, at 11:30 midnight on a Saturday night, I know that becomes the RCMP or in a sense, bylaw officers for nighttime noise complaint.
Okay, could I just clarify, if the phone call goes like the ones that you referenced with the emails we all received, if somebody's having a party house problem on a Saturday night, will the RCMP actually go and check on that?
Well,
Okay.
they are weekend bylaw officers. I can offer depending on the resources available
Yes,
line.
yeah. Yeah, because I think that's so important that we don't get this 10 days later, we need to know, the district needs to know on a much more timely basis. So I'd kind of like to see some evening work on the weekends. And I know that's not the easiest thing to ask of people, but I think in the beginning it's important. Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, I too am wondering how that will work out with 3 bylaw officers. With 3 bylaw officers, that's 50% more than we've had. But some municipalities are working with a lot of bylaw officers. I think I've had conversations with some council members about how big Whistler's bylaw department is. It's very large, lots of employees. So it'll be interesting to see, because if when you're correct, at a party on the weekend, 11:30, and the RCMP are called, a lot of the times the RCMP are monitoring, keeping an eye on drinking establishments and people leaving drinking establishments, and a lot of this at that same time. So they're busy. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Councillor McLaughlin, before you put your hand up.
Yeah. Yes, thank you to the chair. I was curious to see you had 23 type 1 SCRs. I wonder how that compared to maybe last year. And also just to confirm, what are the parking requirements for that? Where are they primarily located? These SCRs, I think they're probably in certain areas. And just to confirm, they don't have any cooking facilities.
Type 1s, yes.
Type 1s within dwellings. Yeah. So I can answer with certainty last year because the type 1, 2, and 3 was just officially created in October of last year. And so in the past, they were all just considered short-term residential rentals. And that was one of our key problems, was not really having that information. Parking has to be located on the property there. And we have parking dimensions and sizes. Many have been checked. And as council may recollect, that was the reason why some of the appeals were in front of you due to lack of parking. And yes, type 1 is meant to be within the dwelling itself, as opposed to a suite, which would be type 2, which would have the kitchen facility. And so in this case, we did inspections on many. We received floor plans and confirmations. We know it's likely that some people perhaps are leaving their dwellings and operating under a type 1 license, but might be more like a type 3. And that's something we need to uncover as the season unfolds. But the premise is a type 1 is an in-home facility, the traditional bed and breakfast, if you will.
Councillor Bell, question?
Thank you, through the chair. Just a quick question. So great work. I mean, I can't say that enough, because I know this has been a tremendous amount of work for staff and certainly in speaking to other municipalities, it is a lot of work and hence why many of them just went to, there are no type threes. So good for you for all the great work and we're there to support you whenever way we can. I just was curious about at what point in time can we start, or do we look at fining? Is that after we get data and so on through this, the software, that kind of thing? Or where do you see that point happening?
Sure. First off, thank you for the kind words. And I will say that I express the same to the staff upstairs
Thank you.
regularly. It's been a true team effort and I don't want to take too much of the credit, but all of us have been deeply involved. And so I extend that to my colleagues. And we have started finding.
Okay.
Not without discretion. We've been
Mhm.
doing it, of course, upon official complaint, upon investigation and identification of operation without license was the first fine.
Okay.
Noise is a factor, garbage, right? Certainly last summer, there was a chronic offender of somebody who had put the garbage out on the Monday morning, but garbage day wasn't until Thursday, something to that effect, right? Because that was the changeover day. That's very much in play and we will find where needed and appropriate. Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's a fine line. We absolutely will have fined. But as I say, we use great discretion and investigate properly.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
I'll clarify on the screen at the beginning. Thought I saw about 80 type 1, 2 and 3, and then there was another 24 on non-conforming use. So in round numbers, 100-ish. You're referencing earlier, you said you think there's 200?
Yes, I did mention that. It's
Yeah.
entirely possible that there's a whole new slew of short-term rental operations that we haven't come across yet. Either chose not to
Okay.
participate in our approval process or somehow we're unaware of it.
So we don't, it's
Yeah.
speculation.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Speculation, but the Granicus software as it unfolds this
Mhm.
summer will assist us in that regard.
But at the moment, we've
Mhm.
identified about 100, whatever those
Right,
numbers
correct.
total.
Yeah.
Great. Counselor Rowe.
Just a comment, as far as the RCMP goes, I was at a party last summer where they showed up. So it I'm sure it depends on what their resources are, and I'm sure their ability to do that is rare. And I know it's a small sample size, but I just want to put out there that the last 2 nurses that we've hired are staying as the permanent landlord in a type 2. So instead of going for a type 3, they took the advice of having a landlord. She gets a great rent for managing the upstairs that is running as a STR. Yeah.
Type 2.
So there's 2.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Great. All right, thank you, Mr. Allen. I don't think there's anything else, so we'll take the report as read and spoken and received and unless there's anything else, council, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Seconded, all in favor, we are adjourned. And yes, Pam. Yes, Pam.